Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. The next talk in this collection, the book is volume 3 of the Ajahn Sumedho anthology called Direct Realization, and this collection of teachings is from the book The Way It Is, and these are all Dhamma talks that were given during the winter retreat of 1988 here at Amaravati. This is chapter 18, it's called Beyond Belief. From the appearance of the 5 khandhas, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana, and the unquestioned belief that they are oneself, it always seems that the mind is in the body. If you say, "Where's your mind?" most people will point to their head or to their hearts. But if you investigate the way things are, following the teachings of the Buddha, you begin to realize that the body is in the mind. Mind is really what comes first. The body is just the receptor. It's a sensitive receptor, like a radio or a radar, or something similar. It's not a person, it's not anything other than merely an instrument. So this was a familiar theme that Lumpur had in those days, and it was the case then, it's the case now. So we can say, we out of convention, we say our mind is in our body, and we, as he said, we tend to point to our head or our heart. But right now, everything that you know about your body and about the temple and this moment, it's happening in the mind, isn't it? How we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, we touch, we think, we remember, and we put that all together and we say, here I am, I am in the temple. We look at the body, but that's seeing. Seeing is visual consciousness. It's happening in the visual cortex of the brain. It's a mental representation of the body. So everything that we've ever known about our body, our life, the world, has all happened even since before we were born. It's all happened through the agency of this mind. This is the only world we have ever known, is the world as represented by our minds. So this is literally, as Lumpur would say in other places, this is literally a mind-blowing teaching. And if people can sort of misinterpret it or think that it's saying, oh, well, does this mean that this is all just a dream? It's completely sort of empty and illusory, but that's not something that you find the Buddha saying, at least not in the Pali Canon, that life is but a dream, but rather say what we know of the world. I think I was quoting this yesterday or the day before, that the Buddha said, what is the world? That whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is what we call the world in this Dhamma and discipline. Lokamani is a conceiver of the world, Lokasanyi is a perceiver of the world. And so that it's through the mind and its senses, that's where the means whereby the world is known. So he says that's what we call the world. So the world is the world of our own experience. And so when we call ourselves sane or functional as human beings, then our system, these receptors, this life of ours, this body and mind, are able to put those perceptions together and to remember our name, or to remember where our room is, or where we left our shoes, and we can hold all those various different conditions in a well-integrated order, and we call ourselves functional or sane or competent human beings. And when when the wiring doesn't work, when the receptor is faulty, or when we're ill or exhausted, or having an injury or something, then the mind, the system, doesn't put things together in a coherent or well integrated way. So we say that we're sleepy, or we're deluded, or we're hallucinating, or we are say not able to perceive or to know the world in a reliable way. So I think that just this opening paragraph here of this teaching is very, very significant. It also harks back to the dialogue that I was also quoting just recently of the Buddha with the Devata Rohitasa, where the Buddha says it's within this very body, with its perceptions and thoughts, there is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the way leading to the cessation of the world. So that Luang Por Sumedho is saying, the world is in the mind, the body is in the mind, is really echoing. It's another way of expressing that same insight that the Buddha communicated to Rohitasa. When that view of being within the five khandhas is seen through and let go of, there's a realization of what we can call deathlessness, immortality. These words imply beyond the conditioned, quote unquote, and the ability to conceive the deathless is impossible. You can point at a word like deathless, immortal, or unconditioned. But beyond that, there's no more you can say about it, because words themselves are conditioned and mortal. Words, concepts, perceptions, conceptions are only appropriate to the conditioned world. As long as you're attached to thoughts and concepts, to views and opinions, no matter how intelligent and altruistic those views might be, that very attachment will bind you to the conditioned realm. You'll keep being reborn into it. You'll keep searching for the unconditioned in the conditioned, looking for God in the mortal condition, in the changing nature of sensory consciousness, only to feel totally frustrated and disappointed. Then you have to support that soul view, quote unquote, by a kind of stubborn belief. So to unpack that a little bit, to explore that, and this is something that again is a frequent theme of Luang Por's, even today, saying how the Dhamma is unimaginable, or the unconditioned is unimaginable. You can't create an image for the unconditioned, for the Dhamma which is timeless, akaliko. That we use words like apparent here and now, sanditiko, akaliko, timeless, ehipassiko, encouraging investigation. These kind of terms we use to describe the qualities of the Dhamma, but the word akaliko, it occurs in time. It's like it takes time to say the word. The word akaliko is not timeless. It's a word, a concept that points to that quality of timelessness. But because our senses, as Luang Por is saying here, the words, the concepts, the perceptions, they are time-bound. They're aspects of the conditioned world. I'm sitting here, you are all sitting there. I'm using words, time is passing. It's 10 minutes and 43 seconds past 6 in the evening. It's like, so that according to the conditioned habits of the senses, I'm here, you're there, there's time passing, there's space, there's individuality, and those are the apparent, say, the apparent forms that we're, say, limited to using those forms to be pointing to that which is formless, the deathless, the unborn, the unconditioned, the uncreated. We use those forms to point to that which is beyond form. We use conditions to point to that which is unconditioned. So again, this can be a bit mind-blowing or a bit confusing, because the habit is to try and describe everything or have things understood in terms of concepts. But it's really only through not trying to pin down reality in terms of time and space and concepts and individuality, then that realization can be actualized. The Dhamma can be actualized, can be embodied. As Luang Por Chah, he used to use this kind of puzzles of saying, if you can't go forward, you can't go backwards, you can't stand still, where do you go? And it's deliberately frustrating to the mind that says, well, you either got to go forwards or backwards or sideways, or but you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still. There's no answer to that in terms of three-dimensional space and time and individuality. It's only when the mind lets go of that identification and awakens to the present reality, that awakens to Dhamma, then in that realization, it's seen that time is a construct, space is a construct, individuality is a construct. These are perceptions formed, and when the mind stops believing in them and taking them to be real and solid, then the timeless, unlocated Dhamma can be realized. So again, it's hard to talk about because speech is confined to it has to borrow its substance from the sensory world. But and this is really one of the challenges of teaching Dhamma or reflecting on Dhamma. We have to use conditions to help the mind to awaken to the unconditioned. We have to use forms to help the mind awaken and to realize the formless. But it can be done, and this is the point of these particular teachings. And when we talk about timelessness is not just like when we say the Dhamma is timeless, it's not just a very short period of time. It's like time doesn't apply. You could say like a millionth of a second is a really short amount of time. But if you compare a millionth of a second to a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second, then 1 millionth of a second is really long. It's, what would it be? About 20 orders of magnitude longer. It's a billion and 1,000 times longer. So is a millionth of a second a short time or a long time? So not to make it too confusing, but when we talk about akaliko, it's letting go of time altogether. When we speak about the Dhamma, then it's really helpful in this respect to recognize words don't apply. It's not a word, it's not a concept. It's a direct realization, a wordless, non-conceptual, non-personal realization. And so that if we kind of frame it in that way, then it helps the mind to stop looking for the perfect concept or the perfect image or the perfect thing to use. As Luang Por is saying here, you're looking for God in the mortal condition, in the changing of sensory consciousness, only to feel totally frustrated and disappointed. So you're trying to describe Dhamma, what the Dhamma is in terms of a sensory experience, it's going to be disappointing or frustrating. And one of the things that when I had a dialogue at the Buddhist Society with a few other Buddhist teachers and the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, one of the notable things that he said in terms of Christian theology, he said, if you're thinking of God as a thing in a universe of other things, you're completely missing the reality. Which I thought, well, so that's a very Buddhist statement. If you're looking for God as a thing in a universe of other things, then you're completely missing the reality. So any questions, thoughts, reflections? Yes, Gaspar.
Yes, maybe just a short reflection. So it does feel as if the closest sort of the mode of being closest to the truth is silence. As you were mentioning the mind and the body in the mind, I was actually thinking how even conceptualizing things as being in the mind is somewhat an error in thinking, because it presumes that the mind is a thing in which to contain things. And so I understand this is sort of like a pointer to the mind or to understanding the mind, but even thinking in terms of those mental models is kind of like a subtle trap, which I think sort of invites us to transcend that. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's in a way, it's recognizing that sabbe sankhara dukkha, every conditioned thing is necessarily unsatisfactory. So even using a word like space or silence or stillness, they can only be partial truths. And I think if you recognize this can only point to the reality, it can only be a skillful means that helps the heart to know that fundamental reality, then the limitations of that are sort of clear. If you think, no, that there must be a perfect word, there must be a perfect equation or a phrase that can really guarantee to catch it, to represent it perfectly. But if you just take that simple statement of the Buddha, sabbe sankhara dukkha, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. If it's formed, it cannot satisfy. It can't do that. And so whether it's a word or a concept, a color, a shape, a number, a sound, it in itself cannot be something that absolutely satisfies, that represents that reality perfectly. And similarly with Luang Por Chah's a very direct and simple encouragement to reflect on uncertainty, and using the say wise reflection to explore every time the mind makes a judgment. It says, "Oh, now I've got it," or "This is the right answer," or "This is what we should do," "This is the truth." Then to simply to reflect on that by asking, "Is that so? Is that a sure thing?" And that if that questioning, that investigation, that challenging is brought about with wisdom, with mindfulness and wisdom, then it opens the heart up to that recognition. Oh, this can only be a convenient fiction. It can only be a partial truth. It can't be. It can't represent this perfectly. It's necessarily an incomplete picture. Yeah, it's either incomplete or imperfect. It can't be otherwise. Aha. And the aha is the point of that reflection. It's not to replace your imperfect image or idea with a more polished or complete one, because no matter how polished or complete, it can't be done. And so it's that aha, there's a relaxation, an opening of the heart. The heart opens to the present reality, and in that moment, there's no dukkha. So the point of any kind of concept or words or Dhamma teaching, the point is, as the Buddha said, I teach one thing, dukkha and the ending of dukkha. And so that the point of applying those kind of skillful means of a concept, talking about space or silence or stillness, even talking about realization, or the unconditioned or timelessness, the point of it is ending suffering. And so that if it's really clear in the mind that, okay, any word, any concept, any form can only point to the reality, it can only be a skillful means, it can't actually embody that Dhamma, that reality, then things are seen in their true light. You're not asking for more from a concept than it can possibly provide, or a word, or so space, silence, stillness, they're kind of aspects of the natural order that, say, point in a helpful direction. Or like using the inner sound, listening to the nada sound as a meditation object. That isn't the realization of Dhamma itself, but like the non-personal quality of it, the continuity of it, the ever-present quality of it, the inability to be a controller or commander of it. Those are all aspects of the inner sound and inner listening that sort of are helpful symbols or pointers towards Dhamma, but just hearing the sound is just a sound. It's just auditory consciousness. It isn't really more than that. But its qualities are indicative, or they resemble or point to the fundamental qualities of Dhamma in its reality. Okay, so to continue. Beliefs don't change. Well, yeah, everything changes, but when Luang Por says beliefs don't change, well, he'll explain a bit, but it means that we keep believing the same things over and over again. Beliefs don't change. When you're 50, you can believe in exactly the same things you believed in when you were 5. That belief is the grasping of a perception. Some beliefs are very nice and pretty and sentimental. The romantic and sentimental view of life presents a pretty picture that we can still believe in, even when we're 80. When my gran died at 75, she still had a 16-year-old girl's emotional development. When she died, she had a boyfriend called Hercules Cavalier. This is a true story. Luang Por Sumedho's grandmother had a boyfriend called Hercules Cavalier, who was her gigolo. She still had the same kind of romantic longings as when she was a 16-year-old girl. Even though at 75 she was a physical wreck, her mind was still attached to those pretty pictures of youth. We assume and believe and never question the prejudice and fixed views we're grasping, that we never change. They don't change. We keep reaffirming the same old things over and over again. That's why so many political problems arise. It's because so many people hold on to political views rather than trying to be aware of the needs of a particular time and place. How much violence, meanness and nastiness are done in the name of property alone. And boundaries. This is my land. Get off my land. You see it all the time in countries' endless border problems and the meanness of heart, not wanting to let people in or let them out because of the unquestioned belief, this is my house, my family, my wife, my husband, my children, my. Over the course of many years of meditation, I can see that a lot of attachments, obsessions and tendencies have fallen away because of allowing things to cease. The process has been one of letting things go rather than believing, grasping and becoming reborn in endless thought patterns and desires. When we view life as just a passage, we're not going to hang on to it. We're not going to become mean and selfish because we realize that nothing is worth holding on to. Not material wealth, property, status, worldly values or anything else. Nothing is worth bothering with that much because it's not really ours anyway. Of course, we can believe that it's ours, but in actual investigation, in looking into the way the mind actually is, we can see that nothing really belongs to us anyway, and there's nobody to own anything. With the reflection that the body is in the mind, this grasping changes. You have to start contemplating, what is mind then? Because your body is certainly not in your brain, nor is your blood-pumping heart. They're in your body. So it's a few things there. Occasionally Luang Por would mention his grandmother's boyfriend, Hercules Cavalier. It's an interesting name to have. Apparently it's totally genuine. But yeah, his grandmother was very caught up in this sort of worldly values. And this is a theme that I find myself talking about very, very often. And say when talking with people on retreats or in Sangha members or in different Buddhist groups around this country, around the world. And that particularly this sense of how we keep reaffirming the same judgments, how we see ourselves in the same way. And as Luang Por began this part, beliefs don't change. Well, they do change if we let them. But we keep recreating the same patterns. We tell ourselves these stories. I'm like this, or I'm no good at that, or I'm this kind of a person, or I never get over my obsession with this sort of resentful feeling towards my family, or this broken heart that I had, or the fact that I failed my university degree, or I caused a terrible accident when I was a teenager, and I can never be forgiven for causing that kind of harm. That we have different events or different character traits, different say patterns of experience, and not just painful things. It can be like, yes, I'm a really special person. I know that I'm actually far more spiritual than most of the other people here. I mean, they mean well. They're good people, but really, they're just sort of filling space here, and it's really for only one or two of us that are really, who've really got it. That's what this place is really for. I mean, I don't look down on those people, but. They do their best, but really they haven't quite got it like me. They're not special like I am. I'm not reading anybody's mind, but just making these things up. So it can be, that the feelings of inflation or privilege, entitlement, or self-criticism, or regret, and so on. It can be all kinds of different things. But we tell ourselves the same stories over and over and over again. And oftentimes we don't realize that we're just building a prison for ourselves, and then locking the door and throwing the key outside. And that over and over again, I don't know how many times over the years, I've been offered the reflection that the world is a lot more spacious than you're making it. There's a lot more possibility. You don't have to see yourself in that way. You don't have to keep telling yourself that same story. You can change the story. As in the Western psychological field, it's a fellow called Claude Steiner. I think it wrote a book called "Scripts People Live." I studied when I was a university student. And how we write these scripts for ourselves, or people hand us a script, and then we just feel that we've got to follow it. But one of the things that I found very inspiring and helpful in that particular studying that particular book was that you can tear up your script, you can flip out of your script. You don't have to, just because you've got a particular script, a sense of a plan for your life, or a way that you talk about yourself. Who says that it's true? Who says you have to be that way? Who says you have to make that the defining judgment just because you made a stupid mistake when you were 17, or just because you won a big prize when you were a student, or somebody say was a very affirmative of your particular qualities and said, you're a wonderful, special person. Why do we make that what we are? Why do we make that the way we define ourselves, or that we judge other people? This person is good, that person is bad. That we kind of create these patterns and then lock ourselves into them. And that over and over again, if we bring attention to that and say, well, who says that's true? Or like, again, using Luang Por Chah's reflection, is that so? Is that a sure thing? I'm a useless person. I'm a failure as a monk. Is that so? I'm really the shining light of the sangha. I'm really the most wise and accomplished person here. Is that so? I'm totally average. I'm completely unremarkable. I'm not. I'm the most non-awful, non-special person. I'm the utterly average person. Is that so? The way the mind creates these limitations and then believes in them, it's tragic. It's all sort of tragicomic. If it wasn't so painful, it would be hilarious. That we kind of build these prisons, lock ourselves in them, and throw away the key. It's like, why do we do that? Yeah, there's a lot more possibility, a lot more flexibility in the universe than we realize. And over again, people say, "There's no alternative. There's no way forward. This is all I can do. I am this way. There's no other options for me." And just to take a step back and to reflect upon that and to ask, well, why do I believe that? Or who says that's true? Or is that a fact? And interestingly, if we really are practicing and looking at the mind and the constructed, compounded, formed and conditioned nature of thinking, then just a little step back and say, is that really true? Or why do I believe that? Or is that the fact? Why do I think that's the reality of things? Why do I think that's the only possibility? Just a small amount of reflection can open up the field in a remarkable way. It's like, wow. Because if that quality of intuitive wisdom is being accessed and used, then there's that recognition that the wisdom of the heart that says, yeah, why do I believe that's true? Just I keep telling myself that story, but who says it has to be that way? Why do I just go along with that? And that we can, rather than just having another idea about what we want to be, we can simply recognize there is more space in the system, there's more flexibility, there's more opportunity that is there, where we're not stuck, we're not prisoners, we're not victims of this conditioning. It might be a very strong habit, it might be very convincing, but if we pay attention, use mindfulness and wisdom to watch those habitual judgments and habits of thinking, then just steadily reminding ourselves that there's more space, there's more flexibility, that we're not prisoners, we're not victims, then there's a lot more joy. There's a quality of spaciousness, and we find that we don't have to be stuck in those old ruts, those old habits. We're not confined to that. We don't have to see ourselves in that way, and that even if we've been sort of rigidly stuck on a particular perception for 40, 50, 60, 70, 75 years, like Lumpur's grandmother, we can change. We can let go of that. I remember when my father turned 80, he was a big figure in the dog show in dog breeding. He was an expert in bull terriers. He was like one of the world's leading bull terrier experts. Also could judge many dogs. The crowning pinnacle of his life was judging best in show at Crufts, which is a kind of arahantship in the dog breeding world. It's the kind of the pinnacle which you cannot pass beyond, is being the judge of best in show at Crufts. So anyway, in his own world, he was a very big figure, and he was quite happy to be a big figure and an important person in the dog breeding world. And he had a column, a page that he had in a dog magazine he wrote for many, many years, in Dog World, if you're interested. So anyway, when he reached 80, and I was visiting the family one time, he made the comment, I'm a big fish, but it's a very small pond. I thought, wow. Impressive, Dad. And it was really just a comment right from the heart, I felt. It was just, his life was winding down. Many of his friends were sort of dropping dead around him, and that kind of an age where the heavenly messengers were very, very apparent. And it was bringing this more of a reflective attitude. So I was really impressed that, he really had been a big figure and important, and was invited to travel all around the world and judge dog shows and so on and so forth, and was a highly respected figure. But to be able to see, I'm a big fish, but it's a very small pond. And that sense of stepping back and looking at the whole picture from a different perspective, like, why was that so important? Why was I so filled up with all that value system? Why did I think that was so significant? And and also a sense of relief in that, a sense of don't have to carry that around, or don't have to be that for other people. So in these comments that Luang Por makes here, also, nothing is worth holding on to. The Pali for that is sabhe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. Nothing is worth holding on to. These are really it's a really valuable teaching, and again, we can hold on to not just our achievements and our wholesome qualities, things that we're proud of, but more often we hold on to the things that we're regretting or about ourselves, or we hold on to our criticisms of other people or our obsessions about other people. But nothing whatsoever is worth holding on to. And as he says, that nothing belongs to us anyway, and there's nobody to own anything. So no thing can be owned, and there's no person to do any owning. There's no thing that can be owned, and no thing here that can do any owning. So why do we hang on? What's the point of trying to hang on and to identify? In terms of inflation, inflatedness maybe is a better word. One of the teachings that the Buddha gives in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, there's a section of it called the Labha Samyutta, which Labha means gains or things that you get. It's about owning. And he says a samana or a brahmin, like a monastic, who is very proud of their accomplishments. They're proud of their knowledge of the scriptures, or their ability to recite the teachings, or to be an eloquent Dhamma teacher, or they've got hundreds or thousands of disciples. That he says a samana or a brahmin who is proud of their gains, or how much money they get given in terms of offerings, or how big their temple is, how high their stupa is, or how their temple or whatever. He said it's like a dung beetle. And in Asia, comparing a spiritual person to a dung beetle, it's a kind of pretty raw, deliberately insulting kind of comparison. Like to talk about a holy person and compare them to a dung beetle. It's like but the Buddha does. He's obviously making a strong point. He said, a samana or a brahmin who's proud of their accomplishments or their wealth and their offerings that they get, the gains that they have, it's like a dung beetle that's proud of its ball of dung, saying, "I've got the biggest ball of dung in the whole forest. No dung beetle's got a bigger ball of dung than I have. I've got the best dung ball. It's far more impressive and wonderful than any other dung beetle around here." So it's one of those instances where the Buddha is kind of using humor, but also in quite a pointed way. He gets people's attention, comparing the spiritual teachers to dung beetles, and how ridiculous, like saying how big your temple is, or how many disciples you've got, or how much money you've been given. It's like a dung beetle being proud of its dung ball. That it's really nothing to be proud of. It's being inflated about ridiculous worldly things. So, any questions, thoughts, reflections? Anybody still thinking like a 16-year-old? Not uncommon for us. I think one of the for many years the most popular, when we had cassettes, back in the days of cassettes before there was websites, in the Abhayagiri Monastery tape library, the most popular cassette that people liked to borrow and ask for copies of was a Dhamma talk that Luang Por Sumedho gave in the States called Emotionally Stuck at the Age of 15. So that was a really popular talk. I want to read it. I want to hear that one. So anyway, any questions, thoughts? Yes, Anagarika Margit. Well, we don't become what we think. We keep making we keep attaching to the things that we think we are, and keep bringing it to life because of those habits of attachment. But it's something that we have to hold together. We create a self-image, and then we keep reinforcing it, even if it's a painful self-image. It will naturally decay on its own, but we keep recreating it because it's as I say, it's the devil that we know. You know that expression? The devil that you know. So even if it's a painful identity, like I'm useless, I'm no good, that's what we're used to calling ourselves. It's the devil we know. So we keep, and something comes along and says, yeah, actually you're fine. It's like, but we can be disturbed by something interrupting our self-image, and that we will push that away to keep our own favored self-image alive, just because of the sense of being that it gives us. Anyway, so please, if you can hold the microphone a bit closer. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's an echoing, a reiteration of that teaching, that because of ignorance, then the body and mind seem to be a sort of substantial presence of the subject and the object, and that they're given that kind of solidity on account of ignorance, not seeing clearly. And that with ignorance, when the mind doesn't see clearly, then it keeps following those same patterns. It keeps repeating those patterns. And when there's vijja, when there's awareness, then it takes away that apparent solidity. Yeah. And they're recognized as, they're seen in their true light, that this sense of subject and object, this is only a partial truth. It's only a seeming, an appearance of things. That there isn't really a solid me here, the subject, that knows a world out there in terms of the object. That's just the apparent arrangement, and that the more there's wisdom and that quality of awareness, then that division into subject, object, me here, the world out there, that's seen as just a conventional truth, or a relative truth. It's not anything absolute. Okay, so I'll continue. This evening I was standing outside and looking at the dusk, and the trees, the barren trees on the borders of Amaravati, just contemplating that the trees are in the mind, and that trees are conscious. There's a certain level of consciousness in all life, in the fact that there is receptivity to the environment, and the trees are very receptive to the environment that they are in. This leads to beginning to change the perception of mind to that of a consciousness that pervades everything. Then it's not just a human mind, there's something more to it. But in Buddhism, it's never named. You never try to form a concept about it. Instead, you contemplate the totality, the whole of sensitivity, the sensory realm, and what it's really about. And we have to contemplate this from our own ability to be conscious and to feel, but not to see it in terms of me and mine. I feel these things and nobody else does, or only human beings do and animals don't, or only mammals do and reptiles don't, or only the animal and insect kingdoms do, but not plants. Consciousness does not imply thought, but it does imply receptivity to what is impinging, to what comes to it. We begin to see that consciousness is a vital, changing, universal system. It's like a plenum. It's full with all possibilities, all potentials of form, of what can be created. We can see whatever we can think in terms of the human ability to imagine, through which we can create all kinds of fantasies that come into material form. But the greatest, most profound and meaningful human potential is overlooked by most people. This is the ability to understand the truth of the way it is, to see the Dhamma, to be free from all delusions. So in Lumpur talking in this way, this is a sort of reflective teaching, and so that again that it's important to sort of consider that, well, this is one way of talking about his experience and reflecting on the living system of the land and the trees and the beings, and so that it's an insight or an observation that came to his mind at that time, and that feeling of say how any aspect of the living system, the ecosphere, is sensitive, is perceiving, is relating to its environment in various ways. And so I would encourage not a sense of well, are the trees thinking, or are they communicating with us, or how can I communicate with the trees, or to not create too much conceptual proliferation around these kind of statements, but to get to have a quality of openness, so to get a sense of where Lumpur is coming from in speaking about that sense of how the living system is sensitive and open and connected to its environment. This word plenum is a Latin word. It means full, or what is fullness. And it's really, I would say, it's a good translation for Dhamma. That it's in terms of the way that it's used, both in the sort of classical philosophy, but also, interestingly enough, used by some physicists nowadays. David Bohm used exactly the same word. Literally wrote the book on quantum mechanics. Quantum theory, David Bohm, a very highly respected physicist, who made the observation that the plenum, in terms of the fundamental nature of reality, he called it the ground of existence for everything, including ourselves, which I thought was a really good description of Dhamma. So again, the kind of approach that Lumpur is talking about here, a sense of being out in the dusk, observing the trees and such like. There's a wordless quality of openness, attunement to the present experience, and that the sense of how things say fit together. And he said, you never try to form a concept about it. Instead, you contemplate the totality, the whole of sensitivity, the sensory realm, and what it's really about. And to contemplate again, going back, there's a lot of Latin in these readings, so contemplate, the word templum is related to our English word temple. So a templum in Latin is an area that's marked out in order to contemplate, to be aware of the different conditions that are contributing to the present experience. So an astrologer, or what they call a soothsayer, some kind of spiritual, guide, would set out a templum, like mark an area of the ground or of the sky. And what is the origin of what we call a temple as a building? It's like a sacred space, and then they would watch what occurred, what came into that space, what appeared within the templum in terms of animals or birds or events that happened, and then they would make a reading or use that as a kind of divinatory process, so a sense of what does this say about the present condition and where things are going. So like a reading of an astrologer, or reading tarot cards, or reading the I Ching and such like. It was that kind of a reading. So that the templum is a sacred space that you watch within. So to contemplate, and then the of contemplate means with or together, together with and connected to something. So to contemplate is like to be within the space of the temple. So we talk about contemplation, then the mind is the templum, and the attention is being brought within that to see what say arises and takes shape and forms within that templum. So it's an intuitive awareness. It's not about, again, creating a concept or an idea or calculating anything, but rather it's a quality of attunement. So in a sense, attuning the heart to the present experience, and opening up that sense of awareness to draw upon that intuitive wisdom to get a feeling or a reading, a sense of direction, or what are the elements that are playing into the particular patterns of this present experience. What's happening here? How does it work? How does it fit together? So when we talk about contemplating something, contemplating the body, or contemplating birth and death, contemplating dependent origination, such like, you're taking those experiences, those patterns, those qualities deliberately into the space of the heart, and then again, rather than trying to figure things out conceptually or to create particular ideas about that, there's an openness, an attunement of the heart to what the patterns of experience are, how they relate to each other, and then also intuiting the meaning or the value of what's being experienced, and what comes forth from that, what arises in terms of a skillful way of relating to that, or how to work with this particular pattern. Does it say go forward? Does it say be still? Does it say this is confusing? Or does it say speak up? Or does it say be quiet? And so that's the contemplative process is one of awakening and attunement, and rather than sort of calculating or say using conceptual thought to name everything or to figure everything out. So hopefully that is something that people can have a sense for, or can appreciate how that works, or what that means. But please, if you have any questions, thoughts, anything that I just said is unclear or confusing, please ask away. That makes sense, what I was just saying about contemplation? Actually, there's in the collected teachings of Ajahn Chah, there's one section of it is where he talks, which is called "What is Contemplation?" And Lumpur Cha makes it very clear. Then, when we talk about contemplation, it's not necessarily using conceptual thought at all. You know, in its essence, contemplation isn't a conceptual activity. It's a non-verbal, non-conceptual investigation and realization. Gaspar, yes, once again.
Yeah, so as far as I'm aware, in certain Christian mystic tradition, and I may be mistaken, but that was my understanding, that meditation was conflated with contemplation. So I guess what we consider to be as a meditative process, I think in some Christian mystical tradition, it was called a contemplation. And then meditation had a different connotation, I think. So it's, when I think about it, it's sort of difficult to draw the line. Where does meditation begin or stop, and where does contemplation begin or stop? So maybe some reflections on this. Thank you.
Well, it depends how you use the words. I think I've heard exactly the same kind of description that you've given. That and the different kinds of contemplation or different kinds of prayer, and I think it's probably different between the Eastern Orthodox Church and Western, so Catholicism and Anglican Christianity. So that I'm certainly nothing like an expert in those areas, but I know that when they talk about contemplative prayer, then some of those aspects of contemplation use language, and some of them are also deliberately not using language. It's like a prayer without language, and that it's and there are different forms of practice that are used in different areas. And so some kinds of meditation or contemplation use a kind of mantra, repetition of a particular phrase. Some are, you literally read a passage out of the Bible or a scripture, and that paragraph or those sentences are very consciously sort of brought into mind, and that's sort of part of the contemplation. But again, I'm not knowledgeable enough about the different usages, but I think some will use the word meditation for the verbal aspect. Some will use contemplation, and the different exercises they're labeled in different ways. But it is interesting to me that in many of the Christian traditions that they do include that a wordless or like a prayer without language, or what they call perfect prayer, which is approaching or related to that sort of non-conceptual quality that I'm talking about, just like the sense of the mind being awake, and the heart open and attuned to the present reality, and that is taken to be a more sort of refined or a more sort of liberating or superior kind of prayer than the prayer of repeating words, or prayer of appeal, asking for praying for certain things to happen, or praying for assistance from divine entities of one kind or another. So, but I'm not anything like an expert or that familiar to be able to pin it down. But I know that probably more in the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Philokalia, which is quite a comprehensive manual of spiritual teachings. I think there's more detail, more variety contained in that than you find in the Western European Christianity and the sort of Catholic and Anglican churches. Well, I see 7 o'clock has come around once again, so let's leave it there for today.